Welcome to everyone on behalf of Mayflower Church, United Church of Christ. Please turn off or silence any cell phones. I am Reverend Howard Bell. I'm the Visitation and Pastoral Supply Minister at Mayflower, and I'm joined today by lead minister, Reverend Sarah Campbell. Dorothy Williams, our organist and accompanist at Mayflower, is playing for us today. Mike and Beth Peterson were both deeply beloved members of Mayflower Church. I hope that you will look carefully at the bulletin you received. If anyone didn't receive one or receive music sheets, you could raise your hand and I think the people will bring them in. Okay. This service was planned by Mike, with the assistance of Eric, his son, and Christy, his daughter. His life, his heart, his soul is in every piece of music that's played or sung and in every word spoken today. Look on the back of the page and you will see 3 of Mike's favorite quotes and the rationale that Christy and Eric understood for Mike's selection of the music. You will also note that Mike's wish is that those of you who may choose to give a memorial in Mike's name, the preferred memorial is Mayflower Church Foundation. You can leave a contribution today. You may send a check to Mayflower Foundation to the church, and the address for the church is on the back. And you may also go to the church website, mayflowermpls.org, to give electronically. We invite everyone who has a mask, particularly when singing, if you would place your mask on you as we're in this contained room, and to social distance as much as possible. At 1 p.m. today, Mike's family extends an invitation for everyone to join them and a reception at 7230 York Avenue South in Edina at the York Plaza Party Room. That information is also on the back page of the bulletin. Welcome to the celebration of the life of Mike Peterson. Friends, we gather here in the protective shelter of God's healing love. We are free to pour out our grief, release our anger, face our emptiness, and know that God cares. We gather here as God's people, conscious of others who have died and of the frailty of our own existence on earth. We come to comfort and support one another in our common loss. We gather to hear God's word of hope that can drive away despair and move us to offer God our praise. We gather to commend to God with thanksgiving the life of Mike Peterson as we celebrate the good news of Christ's resurrection. Please pray with me the prayer printed in the bulletin. Holy God, whose ways are not our ways, and whose thoughts are not our thoughts, grant that your Holy Spirit may intercede for us when we no longer have words to speak. Heal our wounded hearts made heavy by sorrow. Through the veil of our tears and the silence of our emptiness, assure us again that ear has not heard nor eye seen, nor has our human imagination envisioned what you have prepared for those who love you through Jesus Christ. Amen. You may rise as you are able and join in singing our opening hymn, I Was There to Hear Your Morning Cry.
The Lord is my shepherd. I have all that I need. He lets me rest in green meadows, leads me beside peaceful streams. He restores my soul. He guides me along right paths, bringing honor to his name. Even when I walk through the darkest valley of the shadow of death, I will not be afraid, for you are close beside me. Your rod and your staff protect and comfort me. You prepare a feast for me in the presence of my enemies. You honor me by anointing my head with oil. My cup overflows with blessings. Surely your goodness and unfailing love will pursue me all the days of my life, and I will live in the house of the Lord forever.
What does God require of you? What does the Creator of the heavens and earth, the sustainer of life, the source of peace, ask of you? But to do justice, and to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. When justice burns within us like a flaming fire, when love evokes willing sacrifice from us, when to the last full measure of selfless devotion, we demonstrate our belief in the ultimate triumph of truth and righteousness. Then, O Eternal One, your goodness enters our lives, and we begin to change the world. And you live in our hearts, and we behold your presence. What does God require of you? What does the Redeemer of the heart and the soul, the sustainer of hope, the source of grace, ask of you? But to do justice, and to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God.
Mike Peterson was born on November 23rd, 1948, at the Alexandria Hospital to his parents Royce and Jeanette Peterson. He joined his older brother Bill and Ken in the family home in Osakis, Minnesota on Lake Osakis. Eventually, this family of three became a family of five when joined by Tim and Helen, with Mike square in the role of middle child. Mike's life as a child was one of almost idyllic quality, living on the lake, enjoying the water activities, and a robust and loving family life. I can imagine that at birth, Mike was a vivacious, cooing, adventurous, imaginative, loving, and caring baby. I can imagine Mike like that at birth because those are the exact same characteristics that he displayed for his entire life. Even when I got to know Mike more intensely during these last few months, providing phone pastoral care to him, and even right up until a few days before his death, he maintained these endearing qualities. Mike was vivacious, cooing, adventurous, imaginative, loving, and caring person to all who visited with him during his time in hospice care. In his childhood, his siblings remember Mike as always having lots of friends. Mike seemingly could get along with everyone. In high school, he was a star athlete in football, basketball, and track, but especially basketball, leading a team to the semi-state championships. Mike excelled in whatever he chose to pursue. He achieved status as an Eagle Scout as a freshman in high school. He was popular. He was elected to leadership roles. He became not only a counselor for Scout Camp, but also a chaplain. Mike graduated from St. Olaf College in 1971. He continued his youthful leadership and popularity roles as he became student council president and excelled in athletics, playing both football and basketball. At St. Olaf, he also met Beth Benson, whom he married on July 1st, 1972. A year later, Beth and Mike both advanced their academic careers by attending Catholic University in Washington, D.C. Mike got his MSW, and Beth got her MA in Library Science in 1974. Mike and Beth's first child, a son, Eric, was born in 1976, followed by a daughter, Christy, in 1979. Mike always was concerned about being a good father, as his father died just a week after Eric's birth, so was not available to offer Mike guidance. Eric and Christy claim he never needed to worry. He was truly a wonderful father to both, a wonderful grandfather to their children, and a wonderful uncle to many nieces and nephews. A major marker in Mike's professional career in social work is the 20 years he served as executive director of PATH, the Professional Association of Treatment Homes. He was an innovator in the field of foster care, eventually assuming a national role with NAFP, the National Association of Foster Parents. Under his leadership, PATH grew to include several states. Again, Mike excelled. He was a good administrator and a great social worker and a great colleague. In 2001, while living in Idaho in support of his wife's Beth's career, Mike's life changed dramatically when Beth suffered a massive stroke. But consistent with his pattern in life, Mike became an excellent caregiver for Beth. They returned to Minneapolis in 2004, joining Mayflower Church, and lived in York Place for the rest of their lives. Beth survived her stroke for 12 years, including fulfilling their dream of travel internationally and domestically that included visiting every one of the 50 states from 2001 until Beth's death in 2013. After Beth's death, Mike traveled even more extensively, hiking across England, a cruise to Russia, and many great adventures. Mike was a voracious reader. He is remembered by family first and foremost as a respectful role model for them. He was an eternal optimist. He could find good in everyone and in everything. He accepted everyone. He was tolerant and open-minded. Thank you, Mike, for a life well lived. Beginning in early April this year, just 2.5 months ago, I became responsible for offering pastoral care for Mike as he was facing the reality that his treatments for his cancer were no longer effective in slowing its growth. Mike and I bonded immediately. We treasured each other as we shared many common experiences in our life stories. I consider this rather brief time of getting to know this remarkable man as one of the blessings of my life. My life is better for having known Mike Peterson. And I assume that all of you gathered here today might say those same words as well. Mike was a genuine person who cared deeply about the welfare of others. He offered himself fully to you. He offered his love, his care, and his compassion for everyone he met. Mike's genuine presence was a gift in the lives of all who knew him. On April 25th, 2021, I preached a sermon based on Psalm 23, the text chosen today for celebrating Mike's life. When I shared my sermon with Mike, or at least the highlights, he was deeply engaged and appreciative. Eric and Christy told me that Mike mentioned our conversations as having been influential to him as to his process of dying. I am grateful to God for any small way that I may have been of support to him. For that sermon, the core message was derived from a sermon preached by David Bartlett. David wrote regarding Psalm 23, verse 4, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death." He used the King James Version. "I will fear no evil, for thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me." Notice, David Bartlett says, that it is not the valley of death that scares us. It's the valley of the shadow of death. It's the shadow of death that casts before itself the anxiety of our own mortality. And it's the shadow that death casts after itself, the stultifying sense of loss. David continues, in the context of Psalm 23, it is clear why the shepherd carries a rod and a staff. They are there to scare off the enemy. In this psalm, the enemy is not death itself. Not even the shepherd can save us from our finitude. In this psalm, the enemy is fear, and the shepherd uses his rod and staff to drive that fear away. No one, in my experience, better exemplified this overcoming the fear of death than Mike did. He even joked with his children that his diagnosis of pancreatic cancer might be a gift from God, since it meant that he might not run out of money before he died, because he was spending it so fully on all his travel and adventures. Mike enjoyed his life, even his time in the shadow of death. Mike did not waste his energy and time concerned with his own mortality. Once again, a powerful role model for all of us. We grieve today, and it is right that we do so, in the shadow that death casts after itself of such a dearly beloved man. But we know that the burden of that shadow is lessened as we also celebrate a life well lived and the treasured memories we all carry. Thanks be to God for the life of Mike Peterson. Amen. Please remain seated as we sing the first verse of "Shall We Gather at the River." We will sing one verse of this hymn before each of the remembrances that are shared with us as indicated in your worship bulletin.
morning. I'm Ken, Mike's little brother and older brother. On behalf of the family, I want to thank you all for coming today, and also, more important, for your friendship and affection for Mike during his lifetime. Also want to thank Reverend Campbell and Dorothy Williams, Reverend Bell, for running our service today, and also underline the fact that the Mayflower community was very important to Mike during his lifetime, and to Beth. And so I just want to make that clear. But there's also one other thing I want to make clear before I can get into this. Reverend Bell made a mistake in his comments. He said that Mike always excelled at everything. Well, in his freshman year in high school, Mike played the bass horn in band. But our band instructor, Don Inger, didn't think he played very well. And so for one of the first times in the history of the school band that Mike was asked to leave. Mr. Inger very kindly said, Mike, I think you're a better athlete than you are a bass horn player. And so, although he came to love music and appreciate it, Mike was a lousy musician and singer. So, just take that for what it's worth. We had, most important, I want to thank Christy and Eric for demonstrating their love and their gratitude to their dad by spending day and night with him after his paralyzing stroke a couple weeks ago. They treated and cared for him with dignity and respect. And I also want to acknowledge their spouses, Matt and Amanda, and their kids for putting up with their absence of their mom and dad for so long. There's no one who's ever left this world with a greater send-off of love than Mike had for his children. It's wonderful. Our parents, Royce and Jeanette Peterson, provided Mike and me, and Tim and Helen Ann, and our deceased brother Bill with one of the world's greatest childhoods. It was just, well, maybe anybody's childhood is that way, but it certainly looks like idyllic today. It was wonderful, but I was the closest in age to Mike. So we learned many of life's most important things together, like how to ride a bike, to build a tunnel in a snowdrift, to swim out to the raft at City Beach by yourself for the first time, and how to catch frogs in the marshes near the Sauk River's beginning, and then sell them for a profit to the resorts around Lake Osakis. We learned good, valuable stuff. There was more as we grew older, much of which signaled the community man and leader that Mike became as an adult. Scouts, church youth groups, high school newspaper, football, basketball, track, speech contests, student government. Then and throughout his life, Mike saw the importance of community. He wasn't over sentimental about it, but believed that when people work together, they improve themselves and improve the lives of those around them. That belief in community directed his choice of a career in social work. After graduate school and working for several county social service agencies, Mike became head of PATH, innovative foster care agency, which he led or was part of for more than 2 decades. Became a national leader in the foster care field, and did his very best to put truth to that kind of hackneyed phrase that no child should be left behind. Building community also guided his and Beth's decisions on which churches to join and how to raise a family. For Mike, community meant being church deacon, scoutmaster, even the organizer of St. Anthony's Park's annual 4th of July parade, and much more. Even in the last few years, he spent a stint as president of this condominium association. But at the same time, he had an inward, reflective side. He enjoyed being by himself and reading widely and deeply. For example, a few years ago, he read the full biographies of all our presidents, including the short-timers like William Henry Harrison or James Garfield. Christy recently found a journal just in the last few weeks that Mike wrote as a high school freshman and sophomore. There, Mike talked about a girlfriend he had at the time, recorded things like basketball and football results, as well as events of the day, such as the Republican primaries in 1964. But more importantly, he ruminated about his quest, which became a lifelong one, to better understand God and better understand this world of ours, through reading, thinking, and speaking with others. Talking about community in today's social media inevitably means pointing out what a great thing, though, that website Caring Bridge is. Just these last few weeks, We've all been able to follow the course of Mike's illness through the writings of Eric and Christy, and we were able to see the comments of others about Mike and what a great human being he was. One said he's a source of boundless optimism and unconditional love. Another called him one of the best men I've ever known. Another said he led the cutting edge in training foster parents. They're great testaments to the man Mike was, and I thank you for who said that. But as his brother, I know there are a few times, okay, at least once, that Mike demonstrated a dark and sinister side. And I think that being you've taken the bother to come to this funeral, that you should hear about it. That occurred one spring night in 1965 when Mike was a sophomore in high school. He and a couple of friends, which I've noticed none of them are here, I hope I don't know where they're at, but they've been obviously acquitted by now. But anyway, he and a couple of friends climbed the Osakis water tower and illegally and wrongfully spray painted class of 67 across its top in bright letters big enough for a whole town of 1,200 people to view and to be shocked at. Fortunately for the future of law and order in Osakis, by the end of the following school day, after initially keeping quiet, Mike and his two fellow malefactors start bragging about their misdeeds. I guess we'd call it a high misdeed. And they were soon apprehended by the local police, and them and our parents and the other kids' parents were brought before our Justice of the Peace, the Honorable Ben Lunsford, who Tim and Joan remember very well. And they were sentenced to pay for repainting, which they did, repainting the water tower, which they did by midsummer. But more importantly, and it's interesting, it's completing the circle. They were, being that we're here at a cemetery this morning, they were sentenced to rape the entire Lakeview Cemetery in Osakis that spring. Needless to say, Mike never climbed nor painted another water tower. Kidding aside, and painting a water tower, as bad things go, is not it's not a particularly serious offense, but it's probably one of the worst acts that Mike ever committed. He was an exceptionally kind, decent man, had a successful and fulfilling career, thanked and wondered and reflected about his relationship with others and his relationship with God. He was a loving husband to Beth, a superb father to Eric and Christy, and a very proud father to Royce, Brogan, Calvin, Camden, Evelyn, Beckett, Charlotte, and Macklin. Nothing made him more prouder than his grandkids. Mike lived a happy and admirable life. I'll miss him every day. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jeff Solanas, and I've been a friend of Mike since freshman year at college. And Ken asked me last night, he said, how did you and Mike meet, and how did you become friends? And the truth is, it was I think we really bonded at freshman basketball. We were on the freshman basketball team, and actually it wasn't at freshman basketball practice, but it was after practice. Because after practice, he and I would play one-on-one. And we impressed the coach. The coach said, wow, these guys are really devoted to basketball. And actually, it was because it set up the timing perfectly for heading down to Bill's Steakhouse in downtown Marshall. And Bill's Steakhouse was known to serve beer to minors. Now, when I say steakhouse, don't think of Murray's or Manny's or Ruth Chris or something like that. Bill's had metal tables, linoleum floor, and their specialty was the $1.19 Eye of Chuck steak. So, but we bonded there, and we bonded there because we enjoyed talking to each other and talking about big ideas, and we attempt to talk about big ideas, but what we did was one of us would say something about an issue and take a position. Immediately, the other person would take the opposite position. It didn't matter what we believed, what our opinion really was. We knew we wanted to argue, and we wanted to debate and discuss stuff, and it was fun. It was a great time, and really it was the beer that we were there for. So anyway, that's how we met and bonded, and I guess today is, this is a real honor to be able to speak, but it's such a sad, sad honor. I'm going to share with you the love and admiration for Mike of not me, but a group of friends. We have 8 couples who we loosely call the St. Olaf group. Some people actually went to St. Olaf. And anyway, a group of couples that have been together for, I don't know, I think, since about 1980, we've been doing things together. Mike and Beth, or Abe as we call him quite often, Abe and Beth were the center of the group. And I think one of the beginnings was a New Year's Eve party at their house by Lake Nokomis. It's the first one I remember. And it ended up being a sleepover. And it ended up being sleepovers for the next, I don't know, we've been doing it ever since. We haven't been doing sleepovers the last few years, but we'd have sleepovers with the whole families and all the kids. And people would be laying on floors and corners and whatever. But anyway, so that's gone on. So we've been a group together since then, and we do summer weekend retreats. And we have, and the guys did canoe trips for many, many years. Actually, we claim to still be doing canoe trips, but we do them at Bill's cabin with all the paddles. Anyway, no portaging. So I just want to share, everybody had some comments, I'm going to share them, and some of the comments I'm going to be directly quoting people, and others I've basically, there were so many similar things, and there's some lessons. But first I want to give some background about Mike that we learned when we were in college. In that background, you've heard about him as a student leader and ended up being student body president, and he was in all kinds of activities, and he recruited his friends to go participate in these activities, whether we knew what we were doing or not, or why. And he also played football besides basketball. That's how he got one of his nicknames. And that nickname was the Massive Pa. And he got it. It was a game at Beloit, and those of us who weren't on the team were back at Heath Creek drinking a beer, and we were listening on the radio, and Faribault radio station covered the St. Olaf team, and they went to all the games. And the St. Olaf, and the announcer for the radio station was very colorful. And all of a sudden, it broke out that the Beloit runner got the ball, and he was going around and Mike Peterson sticks out a massive paw and swats the runner to the ground. And so, ever since he swatted that runner to the ground, some of us have known him as Massive Paw. Anyway, some of the other things. He was always cold. He was always cold. He would put a shawl or something, a blanket over his shoulders, and he carried that around. I thought that was part of the reason we named him Abe. I mean, he looked like Abraham Lincoln. He was tall. Then he grew that beard, and boy, then he really was Abe Lincoln. And but there's a famous painting of Abraham Lincoln with a shawl around his shoulders. I don't know if you guys have ever seen it, but boy, when you'd see Mike with that thing around his shoulders, you thought, Abe. also, so he was cold all the time. He was messy. I think from his freshman year, his roommates they said, God, his room is a mess. His side room was piled up with stuff and was impassable. And I'm going to read their quote. His roommates typed on his portable typewriter, that Mike had this portable typewriter, we had typewriters back then, on his study desk. They taped on it, Abe, your side of the room is a mess. Clean it up, on a clean sheet of paper. Well, when Abe got back to the room, he typed his reply for them. It was, quote, are poems always written on clean white sheets of paper? Did Jesus live in a nice, neat apartment? Anyway, also he was always late to stuff. I get a lot of grief from my wife Jeannie because I try and get to places at the very last moment. And I never had to worry when I went to an event that Mike was going to be at, because I was never the last one. And it started that way, I think, in college. I remember his sophomore roommate, Al, said, one of my fondest memories of sophomore roommate was Abe's reluctance to get up in the morning and go to class. He would often lay in bed until 10 minutes before the first class would begin. Never being one to be concerned about his attire, he would get up, stagger over to his pile of dirty laundry, and pick out from the pile what he thought were the cleanest clothes. It didn't matter how wrinkled they were or if they matched at all. He would then shuffle off to class in his disheveled state. But he was a lifetime great reader and thinker.
We try to wrap up, or maybe you could read some more at the reception.
Okay, great. Well, I just want to say that we learned three things from Mike, I think, that we want to put on. First was laughter and a joy for life. Eric and Christy had mentioned laughter in their thing. We had, he loved to say he was susceptible to a good time. And we saw his joy for life in canoeing and the many things he did canoeing and other ways when we were out on the trail, and he loved nature. And the second thing was kindness, a lack of self-centeredness, caring, considerate, generous. You saw it in the care of Beth. You saw it in many other ways. We all have examples of it, I'm sure. When he and Beth came out to Lewis and Clark College to support Jeannie and I after our son's death. But many other things. You saw that caring and kindness. Also, I think the third thing that we learned from him, a third thing, was to be present, to be a listener, and curious about other people's perspective. Many of us have remembrances of car trips and hiking trips where we could hear those things, where we talked and thought and shared feelings. And I think one of our children said it best on a Karen Bridge post. Mike was a person who really was truly present with you whenever you spoke, listening and being curious about your perspective, maybe challenging deeper thinking. And finally, in his last week of hospice, Mike was present even when his eyes were often closed and his speech was slurred. He was present and he listened and he helped Jeannie and I remember some details of a hiking trip. And he was present to acknowledge our love for each other, and he even shared a beer with some lucky friends. So that was very nice. And so what was Mike's goal? I forgot to tell you. We did a thing where we did the highs at the New Year's party every year, highs and lows for every year, and then a goal for the next year. And we did it, we've got 30 years of records of these. And Mike's goal for this year was to make it to next year's celebration, balance quality of life with keeping cancer at bay, follow up with people who have reached out to him on his cancer diagnosis, develop and enrich those relationships. 3 out of 4 is not so bad, and although sometimes we don't reach all our goals, and Abe won't physically be with us, he will never, ever leave our lives. And I'm afraid, though his presence is diminished, we will always remember the things we learned from him. And they are to share laughter and joy of life, be kind, caring, generous, and not self-centered, and to listen to others and care about their lives and perspectives, but be willing to help them challenge their thinking. Thanks, our friend.
Be careful.
As you probably know, I'm Christy, Mike's daughter, so thank you all for being here and for how all of you enriched his life. Although I know it would be perfectly acceptable if I didn't speak at my father's funeral, for some reason it feels very important to me and maybe helpful as well. I guess it's one of those things that Dad taught Eric and I, that words can be important. Spoken words, words in songs and poems, written words. I'm certain this was part of why he loved reading so much, that words can relay so much meaning. Having recognized that, I have to confess, I have struggled to find the right words to share. I'm not sure where to begin, how to capture a lifetime of love and guidance and respect and compassion into some neatly packaged box for a funeral. It just has felt too much, too messy, too hard. Instead, what I keep coming back to this past few days and weeks really are all these images in my mind of my dad's life and my life with him. The visual component of a lifetime of memories. We all have these images from our different experiences with him. Some captured in photographs, a few maybe posted on the boards out back. Some shared with people in this room or with people already gone. Some are found only in our minds, our own special images of experiences shared, of ways in which he made us feel, or conversations we created together. Some images I have are those created from experiences I never shared with him, maybe before I was even born. And yet I still have these images of my mind, of what he might have looked like, or how he might have felt during those different times in his life. In the courses I teach at Cornell, sometimes I ask my students not to write anything down, not to speak, but rather to create a visual gallery around the room, filled with all the images they feel are important to the topic at hand. A visual representation of thoughts, words, feelings. I guess this is sort of what have been flooding through my head these past days. I'm surrounded by all of these snapshots of life and love and joy and camaraderie and guidance and laughter and sadness and hope and comfort, adventure, of caring, respect, compassion, and again, so much love. Even into the last moments of my dad's life, he was teaching me about God's love and tenderness. We were creating new images together of the beauty of life, even in the dying, and of God's grace through it all. All of these images, new and old, have been surrounding my mind, my heart, my soul. I know moving forward that what we will be left with are these images. Just as there is power in words, there is power in the visual images we will each forever have of Mike. It's rather fitting, really. He loved art. He would visit an art gallery in every city that he could, and he chose to surround himself with the beauty of art in his home. I pray that today, next week, and for the rest of our lives, we will always be willing to come and take a stroll around our own gallery of memories and feel our souls connecting once again to his.
Our dad always had a love for sailboats, reading, jazz music, and a shared bottle of wine accompanying a great conversation. He also had a love of children, family, friends, and co-workers. He had a love of sports, long walks, poetry, art, camping, and finding his place with God and the church. And though he shared these loves with so many of us, he shared so much more. He taught us about a life well lived. He taught us lessons that we'll carry with us long after today. Reflecting on his life and how truly blessed we were as his children, these are some of the most poignant lessons that I think he taught us all. First, that compassion is an action, not a virtue. That the pursuit of knowledge is a worthy journey in and of itself. That to acknowledge the truth and don't lie to yourself. That children are not just a worthy investment, but the greatest investment one can make. That relationships are cultivated by a devoted interest in the other person, not the telling of your own story. That most conflict comes during times of transition, and that is when people need the most help. That hard, honest work and a focused goal can be rewarding in and of itself. That a glass of wine, a gin and tonic, or both can make for a wonderful way to spend an afternoon with someone. That being present in the lives of others helps them to become better people. That love should be expressed openly, but on your own terms. That it is okay to thrive in groups of people, but also to be alone. That having fun and breaking some rules is encouraged from time to time. And finally, that God is all around us, that there is something so fantastic and wonderful about life that can only be explained as the work of God, and that to acknowledge that and live your life in service to it is fulfilling. As children, Dad surrounded us with love, encouragement, and a challenge to do our best. As teenagers, he gave us space to define who we were on our own and trusted us to make our own decisions. And even when our decisions didn't work out, he was there to pick us up and help us learn and get back on our feet. As young adults, he drove us to enrich our lives through education and encouraged us to love boldly. As we became parents, he quickly refocused all of that support on the grandkids. And as adults, he was our friend and confidant, and the man who still loved us as unconditionally as he has each and every day since the day we were born. After Dad's cancer diagnosis, he created an advance directive. In this, he included things that he felt made life beautiful. We thought it'd be nice to share these thoughts here. These are his words. Things that make life most worth living. Faith in God the Creator. The need for each individual to learn and understand who they can best be. The biblical imperatives of forgiveness, reconciliation, and love. The knowledge that we as individuals working together can make a difference in the world. The understanding that literature, art, and music connect us through generations and across cultures. Commitment to justice and equality. And my undying and ever-enduring love of my children, my grandchildren, and my wonderful friends and family. We knew that Dad wouldn't be with us forever. He lived a very full, rich life, full of friendship and love and knowledge and family. And his life is so full that his cup runneth over to touch every one of our lives. The lessons that he taught us are his legacy that we carry forward. We will see Dad and how we live our lives through how we teach each other, and we'll see it in the lives of the grandchildren and their grandchildren long after we are all gone. Mike Peterson was a gift to all of us, and his lessons of compassion are the legacy that lives on in us all.
It's really moving. We teach one another how to live and how to die. When I heard Mike was dying, I asked his children if I could visit him. I had been on leave of absence due to my own family crises, my spouse's strokes, and both my parents' deaths. But I wanted to say goodbye and to be blessed by this saint one last time. He was a saint, you know. Though in true Scandinavian fashion, he would brush that off. I was his minister for 16 years. One of the best things about being a minister is being invited into people's lives, witnessing the struggles and the heroism up close, and then weaving these stories, your stories, in with the Bible stories to help us all reflect on how to live and why we live. Yes, we teach one another, guided by our Bible stories, how to live and how to die. One of the hard things about being a minister is time. You never have enough time to spend with someone, to listen to the stories of their life. I feel this very strongly with Mike. This wishing I could have been with him more, learned more from him about how to do this thing called life. This person whose beloved soulmate was stroked at 51, and yet they both together found a way to live, not the life they had intended and worked hard for with advanced degrees and more, but another life, and they kept growing, learning, and loving life. This person whose beloved son was thrust onto an arduous cancer journey as a young man with young children. And this person whose own cancer journey was made only more brutal by the social restrictions of the COVID pandemic. As a minister, I wanted more time with Mike to harvest his faith, life, wisdom, to share it with our beloved congregation, and just for myself, to learn about how to stay open and courageous in this good but hard life. I went to his home that day. It was the first in-person pastoral care visit I had made in over 15 months. I loved being on the inside of his home, his condo, looking at all his art, especially seeking the Kath Kollwitz piece, and gazing at the photos of his family, all those babies around him with his same blue eyes, and glancing at the bookshelves. I reminded his children of the Mike lore in my family, how my husband looked up to Mike, quite literally, when he was a freshman at St. Olaf, and there was Mike Peterson, the senior class president, up high on the stairs of an administration building with megaphone in hand, speechifying against the Vietnam War. Mike Peterson and I shared these two passions for art and for social justice. And when the two meet, as with the choral piece Mike commissioned in memory of Beth, entitled "To Change the World," all the better. Then I was led from the living room into the dining room. And what does he do there on his deathbed when he sees me? He inquires softly after my husband and urges me to read Beth's book, Living the Unintended Life. He wants to help me as he is dying. As I drove home that day, I felt blessed, sad, but blessed by this saint. I thought of other things he had shared with me about his life during our pandemic phone calls. I thought about how he learned through the church pandemic communications about a need and then gave his card to Kim, an undocumented friend of Mayflower from the Congo. I thought about where Mike always sits in the Mayflower Sanctuary. Liberal Christianity is rigorous and demanding. Could it be that the judgment at the end of life, often called Judgment Day, is that honest self-reflection on one's deathbed? Did I love well? It's the only question that ultimately matters. Did I love well? Oh, Mike, you did. You loved well. You bore witness to God and to God's goodness your entire life. Let us be in prayer. Holy One, God of all consolation, hold this family in your tender love as they grieve the loss of their beloved. Grant to Eric and Kristen, the children who sat protectively by their father's side during his dying days, grant them peace now, the peace that passes all understanding. God of all life, hear our words of gratitude, a gratitude truly deep, truly too deep for human words. For the life of this one with lively blue eyes, kind heart, and passion for God's dream of justice, for Mike. And we are grateful that he will live on through his children and his grandchildren, his lively blue eyes, his kindness, his passion for God's dream of justice, through them in this world. God of our living and of our dying, hold us all as we face the truth of existence. Support us all the day long of this good but hard life until the shadows lengthen and the evening comes and the busy world is hushed. The fever of life is over and our work is done. Then God, in your mercy, grant us safe lodging, holy rest, as we join our voices in saying the prayer our brother Jesus taught, our Creator, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, power, and glory forever. Amen.
With apologies for being the timekeeper, I think we'll need to not do Beautiful Savior. You have the hymn music, and you can sing it in glory to yourselves. Please join me now in the responsive reading of the Litany of Remembrance. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we remember you. In the blowing of the wind and the chill of winter, we remember you. In the opening of the buds and the rebirth of spring, we remember you. In the blueness of the sky and the warmth of summer, we remember you. In the rustling of the leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember you. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember you. So long as we live, you too shall live, for you are now a part of us. We remember you.
Into your hands, O God, we commend your servant Mike Peterson. Receive him into the arms of your mercy, into the blessed rest of everlasting peace, and into the company of the saints in life. Amen.
Go now in peace. May the love of God surround you. May the grace of God astound you. May the hope of God ground you. Amen.